Hey everyone, it's Sonia here. So today I wanted to talk to you about something which I find really striking, which is a kind of hypocrisy. You can provoke people to moral outrage about racism when it suits you. And then when it doesn't suit you, you can just make sure that that stays really quiet. And that's what's happening right now with the conflict in Ukraine. And I find it absolutely bizarre. To me, it just really highlights how our government and the media can just manipulate people for their own ends. You know, for whatever their goals are, they can manipulate you this way or that way. Either pay attention to it or don't pay attention to it. And now we're supposed to just ignore that. That there are real Nazis, real racists in Ukraine, and we're supposed to just kind of work with them, you know? Not saying all Ukrainians are Nazis, obviously, or even that their government is, but they do have some people in their militias which are joining the fight right now, which are avowed Nazis. So somehow we're supposed to just ignore that. So if you like the video today, thanks for hitting like. Thank you for your support on Patreon. That keeps my channel going. And if you don't have an emergency food supply, it's not too late to get one at preparewithtruthorgirls.com, which is my link for my Patriot Supply. You can get $50 off a 4-week supply of MREs that are specially prepared to last 25 years, so they're ready when you need them. And that includes 2,000 calories a day. So if you're interested, please check out the link below for more info and a discount. Let's check out what's happening with Ukraine right now. These British citizens are signing up to fight in Ukraine.
Hello, yeah, we've come to join the Ukrainian army. We're young, strong, fit men. We can help, so why not? Obviously it's a hard time, but if I'm this scared and this apprehensive, and what are the people over there going through?
Oh, what a sweetheart! You know, he really wants to help. But does he know what kind of people are in Ukraine working with the Ukrainian army? Does he know that it includes far-right militias? See, you might have heard Vladimir Putin saying that he is in Ukraine fighting Nazis, and you might have kind of wondered, what does he mean by that? Is this just hyperbole? Is he exaggerating? Is he just making it up? What's he talking about? Ukraine instability provides white supremacists with the same training opportunities that the instability of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria has provided jihadist militants for years. So it has emerged as an international hub of white supremacy. Interesting. So apparently all these countries were sending people over and training people to protect Ukraine from Russia. But this includes all kinds of radical groups, in particular, white supremacists. Putin is saying that the Ukrainian government are Nazis, which is actually not true. As they say here, in fact, Ukraine, a democratically elected government whose president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is Jewish. So, of course, how can a Jew be a Nazi? You know, he's not. But what's happening is there is the Azov Battalion, a unit of the National Guard in Ukraine, which has attracted far-right fighters from all over the world. So this is the Azov Battalion. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about them. Facebook is reversing its ban on posts praising Ukraine's far-right Azov Battalion. Well, as it turns out, this is a far-right armed forces. Posts praising their role in defending Ukraine or being in Ukraine's National Guard will be allowed. But there was something about them that before you weren't even allowed to mention them, certainly not praise them. It was banned in 2019 under Facebook's dangerous individuals and organizations policy, alongside groups like the KKK and the Islamic State. A 2016 report by OHCHR found that Azov soldiers had raped and tortured civilians during the 2014 Russian invasion of Ukraine. The battalion itself will still be banned from using Facebook, but for the time being, they're making a narrow exception for praise of the Azov regiment strictly in the context of defending Ukraine. So there is something wrong with this battalion. They were banned before. They're considered dangerous. They've done horrible things in the past, but now it's okay to praise them. What happened? Well, here is a post on Facebook a picture of a member of this Azov Battalion. Hey, what does that patch on his arm mean, by the way? What is this little thing here? I did not see anything. Well, apparently this is like a form of the swastika. A German television program have reported on this battalion, and you can see more of this kind of insignia on their uniforms in their report.
Und dem, was wichtig ist an diesem Montag, ich begrüße Sie ganz herzlich und Norbert König kümmert sich nachher um den Sport. Ja, auch um ein bisschen Tennis. Guten Abend.
Brüchige Waffenstillstandsvereinbarungen, weil es auf beiden Seiten einen permanenten Machtkampf zwischen Hardlinern und Kompromissbereiten gibt. Freiwilligenbataillone aus nahezu jedem politischen Spektrum verstärken etwa die Regierungsseite und in der Ukraine ist Wahl.
Oh, I did see that. I saw das Hakenkreuz and the SS symbol. That was on their uniforms. Well, it sure seems like it's really okay to stick up to support this Nazi battalion now at this point. Just 2 weeks ago, if you supported the trucker protests in Ottawa and even thought maybe they had a good point about the vaccine mandates, you were standing with the swastika. You were a terrible person. Justin Trudeau even said this to a member of parliament who is the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. And somehow now, like, it's okay. It's okay to support these people because they're doing what America wants, which is fighting the Russians. So because they're fighting the Russians, which serves American interests, now we just need to ignore the fact that some of these people are actual Nazis. The presence of neo-Nazis in Ukraine is not a conspiracy theory. It's been well documented. It's not limited to a small fringe. A study by George Washington University revealed the presence of a neo-Nazi group called Centuria at Ukraine's National Army Academy, where the Canadian forces hold training sessions. Centuria has ties to Azov, the right-wing extremist militia, which is now integrated into Ukraine's army. Canadian military advisors are stationed at the National Army Academy, specifically in the Delta classroom, which benefits from high technology and which is also funded by Canada. That means the Canadian Armed Forces have been training neo-Nazis in Ukraine. In June 2015, the Canadian Defense Minister declared that Canadian forces would not provide training or support to the Azov Battalion. And yet, they're still there, training them. Between 2014 and 2017, the U.S. House of Representatives passed amendments banning support of Azov. But these amendments were lifted due to pressure from the Pentagon. The ban was reinstated in 2018. But seriously, why would the Pentagon want to block that? What is there to even discuss? Can you imagine if the US tolerated part of their military openly avowing Nazi ideology and brandishing Nazi symbols? Why does everyone turn a blind eye to the right-wing extremists in Ukraine? Even more bizarre, in 2018, an Israeli human rights group found themselves having to petition their own government to stop arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. A year later, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who met with the chief of a Ukrainian party that included neo-Nazis. He met with members of the delegation at his office in Jerusalem in July 2019. Does this remind you of anything? It reminds me of when the US funded and armed the Taliban to help them fight off the Russians in Afghanistan. And we all know how that turned out. And also, here's a little tidbit about what happened in Ukraine after all these weapons were handed out to all the people. I remember seeing on Facebook these cute little posts of these cute little babushkas with their Kalashnikovs. Oh, look at badass babushka with her gun. You know, she's going to fight the Russians. What a badass. Yeah, for sure. What a badass. You're seeing beautiful, brave young women in uniform, armed, ready to fight. Except that actually what happened was they gave guns to everybody. Literally everyone, including criminal gangs, including also Nazis. And here is a man he's in Ukraine, and he's saying what the effects of this have been.
The Zelensky regime handed out willy-nilly in the last few days. A lot of criminals have these military-grade weapons, quite frankly. And so there's been robberies, there's been looting, there's been rapes, there's been all kinds of havoc because of these criminals. And it's known for a fact that these, a lot of the shooting that went on last night in Kiev had nothing to do with the Russians. The Russians were 10 kilometers or more away from these shootings, so it was clearly probably gang-related, gangs settling scores and shooting one another. That's something that the Western media is not talking about, of how the Zelensky regime, by handing out weapons, has basically given weapons to all the criminal elements in the city. And the criminal elements in the city are, first of all, figuring out their dominance hierarchy and this anarchy that the government has created. And soon enough, once that's settled, they'll start targeting the civilians.
Well, that's really scary, especially considering we now know who some of these people are. We know that there's definitely this big far-right influence. Actually, they have been doing a few things. Greasing bullets against Chechens with pig fat. So here they are fighting against the Chechens, and just to really stick it to them, before they shot them, they took the bullets and put pig fat on them, just to make sure they weren't halal. That is just like a really small thing compared to some of the other stuff they've been doing. You remember this guy, concerned citizen, who wanted to volunteer to go over there? I'm wondering how he's going to feel about things when he gets there, because he's liable to witness some of this kind of stuff himself. Students fleeing Ukraine say they face segregation and racism at the border. There's a lot of foreign students in Ukraine, especially medical students, because tuition is cheaper, but the education is good. A lot of them are not white. A lot of them are African. Some of them are Asian, like Indian. So what they discovered was that as they were trying to flee, these Ukrainian forces who were in charge of maintaining order were allowing all the white people onto the trains or the buses to get out of the region. And they weren't letting the non-white people get on. They just treated them like second-class citizens. I'm not actually surprised, considering what we know about them. So one of the students said, more than 10 buses came and we were watching everyone leave. We thought after they took all the Ukrainians, they would take us, but they told us we had to walk, that there were no more buses, and told us to walk. So here are the people that are left behind. As you see, they're all not white. University students, many from Nigeria, fleeing the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. They're stuck. I guess eventually they got some transportation. Allegations of violence. Medical student from India. There are 3 checkposts we need to go through to get to the border. A lot of people are stranded there. They don't allow Indians to go through. So that's okay now because they're fighting the Russians. I guess it's okay. I don't think it's okay. They allow 30 Indians only after 500 Ukrainians get in. To get to this border, you need to walk 4 to 5 kilometers from the first checkpoint to the second one. Ukrainians are given taxis and buses to travel. All other nationalities have to walk. They were very racist to Indians and other nationalities. She added that she witnessed violence from the guards to the students waiting at the Ukrainian side of the border. After the Indian girls got in, the boys were beaten up. I saw an Egyptian man standing at the front with his hands on the rails, and because of that, one guard pushed him with so much force, and the man hit the fence, which is covered in spikes, and he lost consciousness. We took him outside to give him CPR. They just didn't care, and they were beating the students. They didn't give 2 hoots about us, only the Ukrainians. Interesting, not surprising. More reports about this kind of thing. Black British student says she faced racism and white supremacy at Romanian border in escape from Ukraine. She said Ukrainian people were given priority to cross the border safely. It's racism, it's white supremacy, she said. Speaking from a refugee shelter in Romania, people defending the behavior we've got, they have said that they need to prioritize their citizens. What does that mean? These stories are coming out. There's even some footage here. Local Ukrainians who don't believe we should enter. This man keeps circling our car.
When you зараз скажу, хто я. Привіт. Я зараз цей телефон.
And I think that the difference in treatment is not only coming from the Ukrainian side, but also from the host country side. So Airbnb to provide housing for 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. Now that's really, really nice. But let's not forget that this kind of treatment wasn't given to other refugees from other countries who were not white. It's actually the first time that I've seen Airbnb offering housing to refugees at all. I mean, don't you guys kind of get the feeling that for all this talk about racial equality and all this talk about anti-racism, in the end, when it comes down to it, when the people that you want to have fighting with you are Nazis, you're willing to just overlook it. Now, I'm not talking about you who's watching this video. Our government, our media, whoever wants to support this, they can just sort of look the other way and ignore the fact that they're literally dealing with the worst kind of racist, white supremacist Nazis that exist. But they're gonna tolerate them now because they're fighting the Russians. Meanwhile, the Western media has lately also been showing its racist underbelly in its coverage of the plight of the Ukrainians.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East.
But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city
Did
where
you hear
wouldn't
that?
expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's partly human nature, but they are not in denial.
Et on parle pas là de Syriens qui fuient les bombardements du régime syrien soutenu par Vladimir Poutine. On parle d'Européens qui partent dans leurs voitures qui ressemblent à nos voitures, qui prennent la route et qui essayent juste de sauver leur vie, quoi.
I don't understand how that's acceptable. And also, why now all of a sudden Airbnb? I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I'm really happy somebody's giving them Airbnb, but this doesn't usually happen. And actually, if you think about it, with all the other previous wars that there have been, I've never seen so much huge outpouring of concern for the people who are caught in the middle of this conflict and for refugees. I mean, this didn't happen with Syria and Libya. I mean, people were like, yeah, war in Libya, that sucks. I don't remember there being like this much outpouring of support. And I would guess that some of this has to do with the fact that these are Europeans. So, some people don't like having refugees in their country, but I guess they don't mind now when they're fellow Europeans. So I just wanted to bring this up. I find it super hypocritical for our Canadian government also not to have spoken out against this. They were so concerned about standing with the swastika just a couple weeks ago, and now they don't have a single thing to say about it. How is it accepted that it's okay to have Nazis in your battalions that are openly Nazis? Even if you're in a war and you need to fight, how do you accept this? How did the government of Ukraine accept this entire time? So, what's going on with the Ukrainian government? Anyway, I'm sure it's complicated and I don't understand it because I'm just little old me here in Canada. But I thought you might find this interesting. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining me in the chat. Thanks again for your support on Patreon. And thanks for checking out the link if you're looking for MREs with the discount. And that's it. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.